What's going on, guys? I'm Bill and welcome to Bill's How To. Today I'm going to show you guys how to fix a water damaged ceiling. Let's get straight into it. Let's do this. Alright guys, so there's two main types of water damaged ceiling. There's one like this one here where it's completely bowed, given way, it's all wavy, and that one there needs to be cut out and replaced. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this now, but there's also another type of water damaged ceiling that's a much easier repair. And the other type of water damage is one like this one here. So the ceiling is still intact, however we do have a large yellow stain up here. This is very easy to repair. You don't need to cut anything out, you don't need to patch over the top. All you basically need to do is seal off that stain and paint over the top. Now there's a lot of products out there that claim they'll block all variety of different stains, including water stains. Some of them don't work very well. So what I use is Zinza bin, whether you buy it in an aerosol can or you buy a big can like this one here. This is something that's going to work every time, 100%, and it's a quick dry time. It's a shellac base, so it dries in about 10 minutes. Once that's dry, simply paint over the top with your sealing paint and you're ready to go. So before I start cutting anything, I just want to quickly show you guys what we're dealing with and a few things that you can look for in order to make your job a little bit easier. So if we have a look here, basically where this line or crease that's going all the way across is from there to probably about that nail hole right there is the sag section. Now this little line here is basically the joint from the two sheets. So we've got one sheet here on the left, we've got a joint, and the second sheet over here. This side here is all nice and flat, so I pretty much don't have to touch this one here. I just have to seal off that area to block the stain from coming back through, but I'm gonna have to cut it all the way from that line right there, all the way to pretty much right here. So this little crease here is little nail holes. So the upside about all of this, now that I've had a quick look, it basically tells me how everything's structured up in the ceiling without having to cut a little hole and have a quick look inside. So because we know our sheets are running this way, okay, that means our timber work is going to be running across the opposite direction. So if we have a look here, we've got two little nail holes. If I follow that all the way through, there'll be a piece of timber running all the way across there. Come over to our next nail holes. Same thing, there'll be another one there. So now I know that our timber is running in this direction, so I know exactly where I'm going to cut. Just a little thing that you can keep in mind whenever you're trying to assess the damage and figure out how you're going to tackle it. If you're not too sure and you don't really know what to look for, just cut a little hole, have a look inside, and it's going to make your job a bit easier. So that way we're going to be able to know exactly where we're going to cut from so that we can position our timber support back into the roof so that we can attach our new piece of drywall, sheetrock, gyprock, plasterboard, whatever it is that you guys want to call it. We've gone all the way up to our timber work over there, so I'm just going to basically square everything off as much as possible. So I'm going to cut everything along that line there, hard up against the timber. From there I'll measure all the way across to a certain point, and then I'm going to transfer those measurements all the way across to make sure that I've got as straight as possible a little cut right there. So you can see I just took my measurement from the edge right here, which is where we've got our timber inside. That way we've got a nice straight line, and it's basically 600 all the way to the pencil mark. So I've just marked that all the way down. That'll make it a lot easier for when I'm cutting my new piece to go up there. It's just basically going to be 600 wide by however long. So I'll measure that once I've squared everything off. What we need to do now is remove all these nails, which is only two anyway. And any little bit of adhesive that's left over from before. So this one here is nice and clean, it's already come off. But this section here, we're just going to chisel that little section there out, screw everything up so it's all nice and plumb. And before we screw everything in, before I forget, we need to take a little, pretty much anything really, you can even use a blower. You just want to push all this material away from the timber. And the reason for that is when we screw it up, we want to make sure that everything's going to sit back up where it's supposed to and that there's nothing obstructing the way. So just make sure you run your blade or anything blow all that excess material out from underneath the timber. And that's it. So there's not really much room up here, but what I'm going to try and do is put some stud adhesive underneath all these sections here. There's really not much clearance. If you can't get any clearance underneath, don't worry about it. Just put in a couple screws every inch or so, or every 3 centimeters or so, just to support it. But in this case here, I'm going to quickly try and just squeeze some stud adhesive underneath. So this here is the stud adhesive, nice and blue inside. Pretty cheap stuff. It's probably about $10, $15 for a small one like this. And we're just going to try and squeeze that underneath. Once again, don't use anything that you really want to look after. This stuff's pretty hard to get off. And you only need just a little bit on there. So I'm really going to struggle to get it underneath. But we'll try our best. So now we can screw this section here back up. You don't want to go all the way just yet. Put in a couple, like I said, every 5-10 centimeters, something like that. And don't push it all the way up just yet, otherwise you might force it to push the screw all the way through. So we'll just put in a couple. So now we're going to take this timber and we're going to put it up there for some support. Now usually I'd use a nail gun, but I've recently sold my nail gun, bought a new one, and I've left it at home, still in the box, haven't even opened it yet. So I'm just going to be using some screws, which should hopefully do the trick anyway. So all we're going to do is just put it on the end here for a bit of support, and that's going to fit in there perfectly. So we'll quickly screw in this side here. Make sure it's all nice and level. And that's going to give our new piece of drywall, gyprock sheet, whatever you want to call it, something to screw into. So that's now nice and solid. We're also going to put another screw here. That'll help put everything in line with each other. So we're going to put another piece across here as well. That'll help the bridge from this joint over to the next. So same thing on the other side here. Now this one here is a little bit out, so we're just going to line it up with the bottom of this timber here. Just like that. So now we can put a screw up on this side. Same thing on the other side. So we can now measure up a couple pieces to put in between here. So 300. 350, 300. So if we cut 3 pieces at 300, now if you want, you can put a bit of stud adhesive again on this side here, but you don't really have to. This one here is just going to help everything join up nicely. So just clean off the top, make sure there's nothing there. If you want, you can take the timber, run it back and forward until it's all nice and clean. Make sure it's nice and level. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put this on halfway. So we only put it in halfway through the timber like that. That way we've got a section that we screw here for our existing and a section for our new one. Now there is a lot of different ways that you can do this. This is the way that I like to do it. Some people will say it's wrong, some people will say it's right. Everybody seems to have an opinion these days. But this is what's worked for me. can see we've got a slight little bow right here. We just take that screw, and that's all now nice and level. So our new sheet that comes up against it is going to be exactly the same on both pieces. So we're going to do the same thing on this little edge right here. You can see where it's dropped just a little bit. What we're going to do now is just measure up the opening so we can cut out the piece. Doesn't have to be exact, even if it's a little bit smaller, it doesn't matter, we can fill in that gap. So we've got here pretty much 1300. Well, I think it was 600. 13 by 6. So we've got a little recessed area here on the edge of the board that I'm going to get rid of. It's just less mud that I have to fill in. So I'm just going to add an extra 100 mil and we'll get rid of that one there. So 1300 across. Measure it also down the bottom. Remembering it doesn't have to be exact. A little bit smaller is all right. So that's 1300 and we're going to go down 600 plus we're going to add that extra 100 mil. So I'm just going to remove that top section. So if we go down, mark it at 7, we'll mark the 100 here. 100, 7, so now we can cut all this off. Remembering, like I said, if you go a little bit bigger, then you have to trim it all down again. So just a touch smaller is better. So we can score a line up on that 100 mil that we added. So now we're just going to quickly mark up our location so we know where all our timbers are. And that should do it. Apply some stud adhesive. Just a little bit will do. And now we can install our sheet. Hold that one there in place. I was always told to use my head. Now I understand why. So now we've got our new sheeting secured to the ceiling. You can see there's a gap around the edges. I'm not too concerned about that. We're going to be filling that up with tape and also my base coat. So for my base coat, I prefer to use cornice cement because it dries a lot quicker. I can get 2 coats on within probably about an hour or 2. I only use this for my first coat. If you're not sure what cornices are, that's your cornice right there. So that there is called a cornice. In some countries you call it coving or crown molding, but in Australia we call it cornice. So this one here is 45 minutes and it's set. And that's the reason why I like to use this much stronger, faster to get my base coat using cornice cement. So I'm going to mix some of this up, apply it really quick, put on my mesh tape. Whether you use mesh or paper tape, it's up to you. Anytime I'm doing repair work, I always use mesh tape. If I'm doing new sheeting, then I'll use paper tape. So cornice cement for my first coat. Not too concerned about the finish at the moment. I just want to get it on there nice and quick, and then we're going to worry about finishing it off perfectly on our second and third coat. So I'm just going to pre-cut my mesh tape roughly to what I need. And we'll stick that up on the ceiling. ready for when I need it. Like I said, at the moment, all we're concerned about is just filling it all in. Now I prefer to fill in and then put in my mesh tape. That way I don't have to fight the mesh tape to make sure that it's all completely filled up. So now we can apply our tape. All right, so I've got my base coat on now. It's probably been sitting here for about 20 minutes. It's a bit firm to the touch right now. Hasn't completely dried just yet, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply my second coat of all-purpose lightweight compound, which I'll show you guys in a second. But lucky me, it's all starting to peel up on that side. So obviously the water's affected that side of the paint. So I'm gonna have to fix that side there up as well. But at the moment, it's not looking pretty, and that's the way it's supposed to be on the first coat, especially when you use cornice cement. It's not very forgiving, and it doesn't allow you to feather off the edges very nicely and get a nice finish. So what I'm gonna be using is this one right here, which is an all-purpose. It can be used for first, second, third coat. It's an all-purpose joining compound. So this is what I'm going to be using. It's a lot nicer consistency and a lot easier to work with. I'm going to quickly put on a second coat because it's now towards the end of the day, and I'll let this one here dry overnight, and then we'll come back, sand it, and give it our final coat. All right, so the second coat is now all on. So we're just gonna let this one here dry overnight. Once we come back tomorrow, we can knock off any high spots, give it our final coat, and we should be ready to go. So we're back now the following day. We're just gonna remove any of the high spots. And just give it one more skim over the top. Just going to quickly sand this area, prime it, and then paint it. And once the ceiling's been painted, this is the finished product. So we've got a perfect, flawless finish up on the ceiling. You'd never know that there was previous damage here, but in this particular case, this was a worst case scenario. So we had to cut out a large section of the ceiling. Hopefully you guys don't need to do that, but if you do, you now know how to do it. So get out there and give it a go yourself, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video and you've learned something new. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, I'm Bill. Thanks for watching Billshowto.